When did you realize you had a privileged childhood? Best friend and I were making our Catholic communion and she refused to show anyone her dress, going on and on about it, how it was so fancy, so expensive. Family saved for months so she could have it, blah blah blah. I never liked getting dressed up. Proper tomboy I was. I couldn't understand why she was making such a huge to-do over a stupid dress. My mother couldn't get me to go shopping with her, so she just picked one up for me. Communion day arrives. Everyone tells me I've got a lovely dress on. I'm all it's no big deal. Just a dress. Nothing fancy at all. Guess who came in wearing the exact same dress? That's when I saw how much I take for granted and learned to appreciate stuff more. I lived in New England most of my life. I moved to very rural Tennessee. I realized it in 8th grade when we had to make parachutes and a container to protect the egg from when we dropped it off the roof. We decided we'd get a soccer ball, fill it with packing peanuts and other stuff. My group, 3 me included, looked at me and asked where we could get that stuff. I said, I can just have my mom buy it. They sat there silently and agreed. Went to pick them up later and go to Walmart. They quietly sat there, obviously embarrassed, and FOF us around the store. After, we grabbed pizza and wings on the way out. After person 1 and my mom got inside, the boy on my team began to cry. He asked me about how my family, and told me about his life with food stamps, living in a 2BR trailer way out of town. No way to get there but to drive, with 4 people living there. How his parents had to without basics so he could play soccer really changed my perspective. So I did all the work on the project and just bullshitted with them until it was time for them to go home. Our eggs smashed everywhere. I live in South Africa. When you drive to the airport for a holiday overseas and pass thousands of shacks along the way, it's kinda obvious. Pretty late, I realized that making present forts with your brothers before Christmas Day is not really how a lot of Christmases go. When I was at uni and told some friends my mum enrolled me and my sister in elocution lessons at our private Catholic school when we were 5 to teach us how to speak the Queen's English. I have now lived overseas for half my life, but my voice is most frequent thing I get complimented on. So I guess her pretensions paid off. I appreciated it while I was in it, but I never realized how good I had it until read it. Once you read a few hundred horror stories about abuse and neglect, it tends to give you a broader range. While growing up, all of my friends had boats. Small skiffs, small motors. I had an older 14 feet boat with a 40 HP motor. My neighborhood was middle class to upper middle class, so you knew you had more than kids at school, but you didn't know anything about the kids who were getting beaten with an electrical cord. My parents' furnished basement seems like a 5-star hotel the more stories I read on Reddit. My mom organized a big birthday party for me at our country club and told me I could invite all the friends I wanted so we could play football, soccer, all day. I made sure to invite all my friends and also decided to invite my maid's son, a shy but friendly kid with whom I played from time to time at home when my maid couldn't find anyone to take care of him while she worked. The kid was obviously very happy about the invitation and ran to tell his mom, who pretty much teared up and came to thank me. My mom was also very happy when she found out and made sure to pick up my maid and her son the day of the party since they wouldn't have been able to afford transportation to the party either way. To me, it was the first of many realizations of how lucky I am and how fricked up the world system is. My mom was also very happy when she found out and made sure to pick up my maid and her son the day of the party since they wouldn't have been able to afford transportation to the party either way. Very thoughtful of your mother. I don't think that would ever occur to me. I thought I had a privileged childhood. I grew up next to a trailer park. Most of my friends came from the trailer park. Their families were on welfare while both my parents had jobs. We lived in an actual house with a fenced off yard. We had an N64, and both my brothers and I had bicycles that our parents bought new. We thought we were the rich kids. I mean, once a week we ate fast food, so we were living lives of luxury. Then I got to middle school and realized that no, I actually wasn't rich. There were restaurants even fancier than Fazoli's. Some families had more than one car, or even more than one TV. Big fish, small pond. I knew already, but getting to college was a big moment for me. I went to a prestigious Ivy League or bust high school, and I only got into my safety school, which was UMass Amherst. It was kind of a letdown and embarrassing, and I wasn't proud of it. My first semester at college I met people from all walks of life that were thrilled to be there and couldn't believe how lucky they were to get into their top choice. Definitely helped me shift my expectations a bit. This was my experience exactly. I was almost embarrassed telling people I was heading off to state school, and once I arrived all I heard about were people so proud of getting in. Definitely a change of perspective. I was shocked to find out that some of my friends did not receive a car on their 15th birthday. Even though I was not due to drive on my own for another year, I was given a car as an early birthday present and expected that was just how it went with other parents and kids. I was a dang fool. To be fair, I come from a very well-to-do family. Until this day I still can't figure out why the heck someone would buy a 15-year-old a car. After I went to university, I saw how common divorce was after getting to know students from other places. My parents, both sets of grandparents, and all my aunts and uncles were all happily married for my entire childhood. I realized how much stability that gave to my childhood. Reading statistics about how well it predicts life chances shows it's the biggest privilege of all. A parents divorced when I was 5. No big deal, as I have no memories of them together. They also don't hate each other now, which probably helped. But a lot of those divorce stories that you hear are the bad ones, because those are the ones that get more attention. Bad news always gets focused on misses than the good. Got out of private school and into public school the first year of junior high. All of my clothes came from Saks, Neiman Marcus and Lord & Taylor. My mom was having a conversation with one of my friend's mom. Friend's mom said, "Well, our house is so crowded Kim sleeps in the bathtub. If you don't mind me asking, why did you go to public school?" For most of my childhood my family would vacation in St. Barths. As a teen I saw it pop up in a bunch of media as an example of a place only the rich go. The simple fact that you know how to spell it says it all. I never had the latest toys or audio equipment like my friends and cousins did, but I really did figure out by myself that my parents didn't have to overcompensate for a lack of involvement or for alcoholism or other things. I really did appreciate how sane and safe my home life was from an early age. It was in such stark contrast to my friends and extended family that we were abnormal and privileged because of it. We weren't rich and didn't have cool stuff all the time, but we took vacations and all our bills were paid and everyone was always sober. When I became aware of a student who was being badly abused at home and was starved for love and kindness, at that point, I appreciated my parents in a new light and was truly thankful for so many things I'd taken for granted. I thought every adult could buy the car they want, so I asked my friends' parents why they drive a crappy Ford instead of a Mercedes. They were not amused. Really late, like 16 or so, I grew up in a city with a lot of rich people, so I was one of the poorer kids at school. My mum loves telling people the story of how I came home from a friend's house and asked if we were poor. I thought we were poor because we didn't have a chauffeur. We had 2 maids living with us, but my mother had to drive her own car like a peasant. The kids I went to school with had maids, chauffeurs, tutors and gardeners all living in the servants section of their house. We only had 2 rooms for servants in our house, so we must have been destitute. I then moved to Australia, where I met people who thought their family having money was something to show off about. They would take me to their huge houses, show off their fancy cars and all the latest consoles. I met one guy from a very wealthy family who invited me to his house while the cleaner was there. I was chatting to the cleaner and asked her where her room was. She laughed and said this family doesn't have enough money for a live-in maid. It weirded my friend out because I was quiet for a while. I realized that my parents had a crap load of money and gave me all the best things. They just didn't feel the need to spend it excessively. If I wanted a new game, I had to earn it by getting good grades. They wouldn't buy me a car because we had access to excellent public transport. They didn't hire a chauffeur because they both knew how to drive. I didn't get every little thing I asked for because they wanted to be my parents, not a vending machine. I also realized it is not normal to argue with your family about which major world city you will all meet and for Christmas, having still not decided by the 15th of December. Someone had to explain to me that ads for cheap tickets aren't scams, that I was so used to paying last minute prices that starting prices looked ridiculous. I'm kind of glad that my parents let me think we were an average family, but sometimes I feel like a dong when I realize how much I took for granted. Your parents sound like good people. Not until I was over 40. I didn't have a typical privileged childhood. I didn't get new things during the year but received lots of gifts for Christmas and birthdays. Had a mentally unstable parent and money got tighter as I hit my teen years. Was given a car but had to work for fuel, insurance, new clothes, spending money, etc. House and furniture not nearly as nice as what my friends had. Over the last year, I've gotten to know quite a few of the low-income teens who live in my community. Most live in the part of town where shootings are not unusual. Most have no father in the home and many live in public housing. In my community most of these kids are minorities. I look back now and think of what I did have. Parents who wanted to know where I was and what I was doing. Never had to worry about food or clothing. Always had decent shoes to wear to school. Most importantly, I had parents, teachers, school administrators who expected me to do something with my life. I was talking to a kid not long ago. He's a senior, athlete, decent grades, good kid. Not one person has had a conversation with him about college or tech school. It's like no one expects him to overcome poverty. There is no standard definition for privilege. One might think they've been dealt a crap hand, but often there are men who would love to have what you have. I grew up in a big city that currently has a lot of poverty. I interact with people from all walks of life daily. Over time I consistently found the people in the worst situations were not from the big city. Rather they had come from smaller towns hoping for a better life and the city had eaten them alive. Growing up with access to diverse cultures, transit, libraries, airports, education, entertainment etc. is definitely a privilege I hope I can provide for my children. Yep, people ask why more people don't just move to places with better jobs, ignoring that moving with nothing and little education isn't going to definitely go well, and you lose direct access to your friends in the process. When I realized my broke-out parents never said no to any activity I ever wanted to do except horseback riding, but that's because I am a walking insurance claim. We were on subsidized lunches for a while. We were a week from foreclosure a bunch of times and yet I was never forced to quit piano. And my brothers never had to give up their sports. It was all about us kids. The military. I came from strong military background family with a perspective of honor and duty. When I joined, I had no idea of the number of people who were there as an escape from home not to protect it. It was humbling. My dad joined the military so that his family could have health insurance. He was in his 30s and could barely speak English. How he got through basic training is beyond me. However, years later, I'm incredibly proud to have a father that cared so much about us. Never watched a family member starve to death. My parents came from an impoverished farming community in Vietnam. For them it was just a fact of life that they would see several family members would die that way in their lifetime. When my parents divorced and blew through most of their savings in legal fees and we moved to public housing, I like to say we were so rich, we built 2 swimming pools, one for each divorce attorney. We built 2 swimming pools, one for each divorce attorney. Haha, that's perfect. Realizing my parents and the people they hung around with were, generally, good people. My parents had friends that they would hang out with, go to church, out to eat, whatever with, that my brothers and I naturally spent a lot of time with. They were all for the most part, professional people, lived good lives, had good values, and in a sense were good role models. It took me a long time to realize that many kids do not grow up with so many good people around them to look up to. And as most know after getting older, many don't grow up with anyone good at all to look up to. I grew up poor lower class. My family even lived in the projects for a while. But I knew I had it good every time Sally Struthers came on TV. When I read those 80s kids will remember these toys and point to things I used to have to my fiance. We struggled when I was growing up but my mum always made sure we had plenty of toys or the latest PlayStation etc. My fiance really didn't have any toys when he was a kid and got his first job washing cars when he was 14 for pocket money. When I went to the Philippines and witnessed the extreme poverty there, I realized almost every American has a privileged childhood compared to that. It's insane because there are also young Filipinos who are living extremely privileged lives and do not appreciate it as much as they should. Coming from a family with an annual income over $500,000, I can surely remember at 10-12 years, realizing how privileged I was. I was the one who got whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it. I had absolutely no concept of money or money management. Things changed drastically when I got my first job right around my 17th birthday. Parents cut me off and I was to pay for gas, eating out and hobbies. With only $9 an hour I quickly learned to budget and appreciate how much money my parent made. When I started dating my ex, she grew up on a reservation and was working 2 jobs to put herself through community college. I had coasted through life and was making 4x what she made through 2 jobs. I got to see how hardworking she was and she still needed food stamps to make ends meet. She wasn't lazy, she desperately wanted an education, yet she was constantly struggling. That was the first year I voted for a Democrat. All of my preconceptions about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps were rocked to the core. I realized I had so many more opportunities handed to me just because of my family and the people we knew. I think it's possible to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but only if you already have the boots to work with. When I was working a job where all of my coworkers were bonding over sharing with each other all of the different ways their parents physically abused them, I called my parents and thanked them for never pulling that crap with me. It was a minor moment when my classmate told me about how stressed his mom was to be starting a new job, and it was at a seasonal Halloween store as a sales associate. My parents have had the same jobs for decades that allowed them to move up in seniority and make more money, but I never realized how lucky I was to have such stability until then. I wasn't money privileged, but it was plenty enough. But the real privileges came from having amazing parents. I found out around middle school that I often felt bad for my friends, wealthy or poor, due to not having parents like mine. They were distant, not there, uncaring, or even straight up bad people. I would never trade wealth for that. I was truly privileged. When I got a job as an analyst in drug treatment, it turns out that not every mother checks their kid's school books every week, or even makes sure their kid goes to school. Finding out that all the other 9-year-olds didn't get to spend their summers operating heavy machinery and doing manual labor, they just played or hung around swimming pools like a bunch of peasants. In middle school, after my first ever football game, both my parents and grandparents were there and filmed the game on a camcorder we had. My best friend Jake, who is still my best friend, had no one come to watch him play. For the life of me I couldn't figure out where Jake's parents were. That was the day I learned about divorce and parents having to working multiple jobs because Jake's mom was in jail and Jake's dad didn't finish high school and had to work multiple jobs that didn't pay well. It was quite the wake-up call for a 13-year-old kid who grew up in the suburbs, had parents who were still married and both have postgraduate degrees, who basically only bad stuff happened to when he was an idiot and didn't listen to his parents. Pretty recently I reflected on the life that I've led and could see how fortunate I am to have had the childhood that I had. My parents told me they loved me regularly. My parents were both employed for most of my childhood. My dad developed a severe drinking problem when I was a teenager and lost his job. However, my family managed to stay in our house throughout his unemployment. When I was working a garbage job, my dad got me an interview at the company that he worked for. Without a college degree in 2012, I got a job making $40K a year. I've since earned my keep at the company and surpassed my father's position. I still would not have been able to have gotten this job without him being my father. When I decided to go to college last year, I was told that I had been left about $30K in an education fund by my grandparents. So when I graduate, I will graduate with no student loan debt. My family certainly had its issues with a lot of abuse, mental illness, and a whole slew of other stuff. However, I can't complain too much. I've come to realize that I've lived a life of such privilege that I have no right to not be thankful for anything that comes along. When I was 15, my dad left my mom, Went from a kid whose parents owned their own thriving businesses to living with my mom on a Domino's driver wage. Hit me pretty hard as a kid, but now I see a lot of benefit from it. I went to really expensive private schools my whole life, and obviously most of the kids I knew did too because we were in school together. My picture of rich people was that they had a crazy mansion and a private jet and went to fancy places on vacation all the time, so I had no idea we were in the top 1% of incomes. I don't think I really understood it until I was applying to college and realized how much the financial aid process was the deciding factor for a lot of people. When my mom imported Pokemon Gold and Silver from Japan before it came out here, all the time I got a bike and a PS2 for Christmas. In my mid to late teens money was tighter, but I still got spoiled. Pretty recently actually. I'm 17 for context. One of my close friends barely ate for a week because their family couldn't afford food. When I was young, I didn't find incredible that some classmates had never seen the sea. I just thought they might have gone when they were too young and didn't remember, or that they would go very soon and see it while relatively young. And it actually happened for some of them. But then I got to uni, and I had a classmate who was struggling to survive financially, pay for school things and eat at least once every day and not be homeless. That was normal in uni, but he had never seen the sea and it was clear he was not going to go near it anytime soon. He probably hasn't seen it still, and here I am, traveling for hours to visit my grandmother who lives at sea, like I do at least once a year. Probably when me and my partner were discussing old toys and everything he ever mentioned I'd had, there was genuinely nothing I didn't have. He actually said if you'd have asked for a unicorn your parents would have tried to get you one. That being said, I was very lucky, but I always knew it and I was never allowed to behave spoiled in any way. My mum especially does not like spoiled brats. Now I have children, I spoil them rotten. They have everything and more, however if they act spoiled or ungrateful or throw a tantrum for a toy they don't get it. I will spoil my children, but I also refuse to have brats. Oh, and I had a horse. You basically had a unicorn with some parts missing. Pretty early, actually, as a child, I was so angry at my parents because they wouldn't buy me Nikes, because I had to wear clothes that my cousins wore before me. Plus they refused to buy a TV, meaning I could never watch the cartoons like all the other kids at school. I could never eat the cool cereals in the morning like the other kids, didn't get a Game Boy either. I felt like an outcast partly because of all this. It certainly gave the other kids reasons to pick on me, but probably around the age of 9-10, I realized my parents were doing this on purpose. Both to give me a better education and to save up for better things. They pushed me to learn an instrument, which they paid for, the instrument itself, but also the classes in a prestigious music school, and camps in the summer. They also made me travel, brought me and my siblings to the beach, to hike in the mountains, etc. every summer. They fed us good quality food all the time. Most of all, my dad taught me German even though we were living in France, and making me speak German required exceptional persistence on his part. I realized what separated me from a lot of the other kids were actually things that made my life a lot richer, and experiences that would forge me in a much deeper way. So I guess I was privileged, not so much money wise. My parents were paying off the house and we didn't have a ton of money for my first 15 years. Some months' money must have even been really tight in hindsight, but more in terms of the education and experiences they got me to live. Too bad I had a mom with narcissistic tendencies that left heavy emotional problems in me. Hearing stories my sister tells me, she is a victim's advocate. Our mother is a bit crazy and a touch abusive, but she loves us. We always had clean clothes, good food, were involved in any sport or club that we wanted to be. I'm starting to realize the way things are shaping out that my children will probably be fairly privileged. We're not going to send them to private school or anything, but they will have a lot of things other kids aren't lucky enough to have. My husband and I are both college graduates, and he makes enough money for me to stay home with the kids when they're little, 1 and 3. We're planning on buying a house next month. I'm going back to school for nursing and will probably make a pretty good second income when I finish. They always have clothes that fit and are clean, and they've never missed a doctor's checkup. In my world all of this is like, yeah, you have your crap together, so what? Turns out there are so many people who don't. Many of them through no fault of their own. When I was 13 and in the car with a good friend of mine and his mother, friend's mom starts to look upset and break down a little when she realizes can't afford milk for her infant son, my friend's little brother. I knew they weren't in a great financial situation and I knew some people were this desperate for basic necessities, in theory, but always saw it as something that happens to other people until it happened right in front of me. At the time I had $40 sitting in my pocket for no good reason other than to buy something I might come across. I went home with $20 that night. No regrets. P.S. She was a little embarrassed to be taking handouts from a 13-year-old, but her child's well-being took precedence over her pride. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.